I'm Charlie Sykes. Welcome back to the Contrary podcast, joined by, he needs no introduction, Adam Kinzinger. Adam, welcome back. Appreciate it.
Good to see you, my friend. How are you?
So I heard you the other day describing how, you travel a lot. You go all around the country and, people come up to you at the airport and they say stuff. But you said that nobody's ever come up and gotten in your face. You've never had anybody who, given the tone of everything. So what do you make of that? Like people, on social media, people are going to take a shot at anything, right? But they do not come up and confront you. I've noticed that as well, by the way.
Yeah, it's weird. And I don't, look, I'm not encouraging people to come up and confront me. Yeah. So it's not like I'm begging for it. But look, it's I think it's a combination of things. Number one, it's, if you see, it's not that I'm certainly smart enough to know that there are people that see me that hate me, and they probably maybe there's a little intimidation. You see somebody on TV and then you see them in real life. Maybe it's, people may be a little more decent in, face to face than they are on the internet when you can kind of hide behind that layer of interaction. But it's true. I mean, the closest I've ever gotten, two things. So towards my last year in Congress, I remember I was standing in line at a convenience store in my district, and a guy turned around and told me that I should be more supportive of Donald Trump. And I basically told him, because I wasn't running again, I'm like, dude, I really don't care what you think. You're not going to have a chance to vote for me again. And then I was at a airport in Salt Lake City, and some guy sat down and he goes, hey, I see you on the January 6th committee. I'm like, yeah. He goes, you don't really believe that stuff you're saying, right? And then I just shut him down. But that was it, man. Nobody's come up and yelled. Crazy. Yeah, that pretty much is the kind of the end of the conversation. I have the same experience, but I usually attribute that to just Midwestern nice that nobody does anything. Every once in a while you'll catch sight of somebody who's like looking and doing something, but they don't want to do it. I also think that maybe because you're on TV and a congressman and stuff, people are thinking that he's got to be traveling with security. There's like a guy that's true.
Who's nearby, because I remember. I won't mention who it was. I was at an airport and I did see somebody who's relatively prominent, and I tried to go up and say hi to them, and I was cut off like right away. It was like I was not going to get to that person. Fine, anyway. So that
is funny because I get that. That actually happens to me. Like people kind of look around and then come over and talk to me.
Yeah, that's right. Where's the guy with the thing in his ear? Okay, we have so much to talk about. We had the big election from last week, which was Democrats kind of run the table. What does that actually mean in an off year? We had that kind of remarkable argument in front of the Supreme Court where conservative justices actually were acting like they were conservative justices on the tariff thing, and it was kind of a wow. And of course, the passing of Dick Cheney. But before we get into any of that stuff, so tell me about your movie. Because the movie came out, and I have to confess, I have not yet seen it. So make me want to watch a movie about you.
Yeah, listen, this is, and I want everybody to know I have no financial interest in this. I don't make a dime. I'm just the subject, but it's called The Last Republican, and they followed me basically kind of that last, basically from January 6th to about a year out of Congress. And it's the thing that's amazing about it. So I had probably 100 people that wanted to do a documentary, and all of them wanted to do the horse race. Are you going to run again? Yeah. Can you win? And I'm like, I have no interest in that. They were interested in the human element. And so the director, who actually plays a character really in this film, is named Steve Pink. He did Hot Tub Time Machine, a hilarious movie, and also Gross Point Blank, High Fidelity. And anyway, he's huge lefty. I mean, big time lefty. We always joke with each other, and that actually makes it in the movie a lot where, he calls me Attila the Hun. I call him, basically a communist. But what this does, so it documents, throughout the whole January 6th stuff, you have cinematic films from the floor of the hearing, which exists nowhere else. And then it has the human layer of him and I and our interaction, and how somebody from the left and the right can actually get along and grow to respect each other. And then you see the human toll of really, I'm still coming to grips with the psychological toll that all this has taken on me and my family. I mean, I got married a week before the COVID lockdowns. We go through COVID, January 6th, that stuff, losing friends, all this, having a kid. And you see all of that. And it's just a good human story. And look, of all the reviews, it's gotten blown away great reviews. So I would encourage people to take a look, including you, Charlie. You can find it on demand. So it's on Apple TV. You can find it Google, YouTube, and YouTube TV. I mean, and then Amazon. So it's on all the.
So what do they call you? The Last Republican?
Well, I didn't come up with a name, but I think as I kind of see it, it's like the party moved from me, right? You feel the same way. I mean, your views haven't changed besides what I would consider like maybe maturing and kind of like looking at things. Having the ability to look at things from outside the party can cause you to change a little bit. But the party moved for me. And so in reality, when you see this under the understanding of like, I'm kind of the last real Republican, it makes sense. Now, obviously, there are other real Republicans, but I think it's makes a strong point. Also, I will tell you, Charlie, I had a situation in 2006 in Milwaukee where a guy was murdering his girlfriend, and I intervened on that. And you actually see the footage of it. So that's an interesting part of that too.
So it must be a surreal experience to watch this. Those hearings were just a couple of years ago. Actually, we've just hit the 1-year anniversary of Donald Trump's reelection. It feels like a lifetime, like we've been through some sort of historical epoch, and yet it's only a couple of years ago. So is it kind of surreal just to watch that you were there on the January 6th committee? You were a Republican in good standing 5 minutes before that. You became MAGA enemy number 1 or number 2. And now you're out here and the world looks totally different.
Look, it's weird because we screen this at the film festivals like Toronto, all the film festivals. And that was before the election last year. So I was watching it with like a sense of optimism. Like this is what happened. Election's coming up. Certainly, we're not going to repeat that mistake. It's a very emotional film for me to watch because I can, in my face, I know exactly what I was thinking. It's interesting to be in a film because you know what you were thinking at every moment. I get choked up a lot watching it because it's just very, very personal. But then when it came out, on demand, and I saw it again after the film festivals, and now there's a different feeling. Donald Trump won again, right? It's a sour note. And so it's very hard from that perspective to watch it. But I also think it's important because there's a lot of lessons for the future in it, which is like, look, this is a lost battle. The whole January 6th thing certainly was a lost battle. It's not a lost war. And I do think someday, and this will be part of that actually, people are going to look back on January 6th with the disdain that it deserves and the people that were involved with the disdain that they deserve. Kevin McCarthy, for God's sakes, I make the point all over the film. He is the guy, the man responsible for where we are today. And it's hard to watch it from that perspective, but I think also very important because of that.
Yeah, so tell me about Kevin McCarthy, because I heard you say that in another video. What was the role that Kevin McCarthy played? I think I know what you're referring to, but why do you hold him so responsible for all the shitstorm that hit us?
I hold him in deep contempt, actually. So January 1st, I'm on a call with him and all the Republican congressmen.
January 1st, 2021.
Yes, right. So 5 days before the 6th.
Yeah.
And I say to him, I'm the first kind of guy in the queue to talk. And I say to him, because that's the moment he announces he's actually going to vote against certification, which shocked everybody. Because typically leaders will take the hard vote. And unfortunately, the hard vote was voting to certify the election. So he gets on and says, I'm not going to vote to certify. Cheney is like basically F you. And then I'm speaking, and I go, Kevin, dude, you have convinced half of the country, or at least half of the Republican Party, that the election was stolen. I'm like, our country was founded on violent rebellion against this idea of no representation. And when you say an election was stolen, you're saying you have no representation, you have no voice. And I go, there's going to be violence on the 6th. There's going to be violence. And he just said to me, okay, next caller. I mean, that was the response, next caller, operator. And so the 6th comes around, the whole history of that. And then, so basically from the 7th until a certain day I'll mention, there was dead silence. I mean, I remember listening to the Bulwark to you on the 7th. Right. It's like, this is the moment we turn away. That was the conversation everywhere. And it was like crickets in the GOP caucus. Now, I have deep regrets, and I talk about this in the film, because I was trying to get the other 9 impeachers to basically take over the party, try to remove McCarthy. We would become a clearinghouse for who PACs can give to and not. And I think we had a fighting chance to win that fight. And unfortunately, to be honest with you, the 9 other impeachers went silent. They thought we could heal the party. And I never thought we could. But
a lot of people did.
Yeah. And so it's crickets until one moment, and I think the date was the 29th of January, around there, and that is Kevin McCarthy goes to Mar-a-Lago. And that was a moment, and I can feel it, I can see it, I can crystal clear remember it. When I saw that picture, all of a sudden it's like, we made our decision. And Kevin made his decision, because for 3 weeks he's sitting around thinking, can I beat MAGA and still become speaker? And he came to the decision that he couldn't. And so what do? You embrace MAGA. Listen, Charlie, Donald Trump had nobody at Andrews when he left. He leaves Andrews and nobody's there. His kids, that's it. It's barely covered in the media. He puts out no message. He's embarrassed. He's in a fight with his daughter. He's persona non grata. And then Kevin McCarthy shows up. And when he showed up, it's like the ambulance showing up to cardiac arrest and taking those paddles and bringing somebody back to life. And that's what he frickin' did. That's what he did. He owns this.
That is exactly correct. And you want to talk about the hinges of fate, the hinges of history. That period from January 6th to that moment. You could feel all of the different possible timelines, all the different choices that could be made. Because on January 7th, and I remember talking about it, I mean, it felt, first of all, complete vindication for those of us who had opposed Trump. And everybody in the Republican Party had just moved on. Everybody had decided, members of his cabinet had quit. There was just no question about it. He had disgraced himself and he was done. So January 20th comes along and he gets on that helicopter and he leaves, and it felt like the end of an era. And Republicans could have gone a different direction. That's why those hinges of fate, rest on such small decisions by very, very small men. And there are a few smaller than Kevin McCarthy. And you're right. That was the moment when I saw that picture of him down at Mar-a-Lago. I said, wow, they're going to resurrect this guy. They're going to make him acceptable again.
Yeah, and listen, Charlie, you make the point about small decisions, and I have no idea if what I did will play a role in history or have an effect. I don't know, but I do know this: Kevin McCarthy, a small man who took his personal desire to be speaker, and congrats, Kevin, you were the shortest speaker in modern history. Awesome. And you got kicked out. Okay. So great. Good job. And also you got your butt kicked at Prop 50. Secondly, you look at people like Mitch McConnell, who is now trying to resurrect himself by being this truth teller, who could have said, I'm voting to sustain the impeachment of Trump. And he would have gotten the other Republicans with him, a significant amount of them, and Trump wouldn't have been able to run again. And you think about all those little decisions, and they are, yes, they're powerful people that make them, but in their minds, they're regular people. Everybody has an opportunity to make a decision, and they cowered it out. They chickened out because they couldn't see themselves, turning against the tribe, I guess. They have to live with that.
Well, and they also just maybe figured that things would take care of themselves without them falling on their own swords. After the election, the people who said, okay, what's the downside of humoring Donald Trump if he actually thought he won? What could possibly happen? Because surely, this will work itself out. A lot of other people figured, okay, I am not going to take agency for, a leadership role because somebody else will do it for me. Right. And I think that's one of those big dividing lines. And we have a series of those things that led us to where we're at. I was thinking about you and other Republicans with the passing of Dick Cheney. And of course, the role that his daughter played, and what an extraordinary final chapter he had. And unfortunately, we have this horseshoe politics now, where people on the left and on the right, if you're a MAGA right, you hate the Cheneys. If you're on the left, you still hate the Cheneys. And so it kind of a reminder that, people can change and people can make fundamental moral decisions. You can, and the thing about legacies is they're complicated. All of us in our lives, we make bad choices. We make bad mistakes. If you get hung up like, 20 years ago, Adam Kinzinger said to Charlie Sykes X, Y, and Z. Okay, well, that happened. But are we going to give credit to the choices that people made when it really counted? And a lot of the people on the left who will say that, this fight for democracy is the existential fight of our lifetime, and yet, are reluctant to give credit to Republicans like you or conservatives like me who in fact said, no, we're not going to be part of all of that. And you've talked about this, the superpower that Donald Trump has. Donald Trump's going to forgive everybody. MAGA is going to accept everybody. And this is kind of a lesson, isn't it?
It is. Look, I mean, literally, if you put out a show that said, I decided I love Donald Trump, you'd be at the White House the next day. I mean, that's the thing. You couldn't do it twice, but you could do it that once. Yeah, right. And yeah, I mean, this is the thing that bothers me, Charlie, a lot is, people tell me, and I think, by the way, I want to be clear, the vast majority of what I will say, I guess just generic Democrats, I think do understand this point. But the loud side doesn't, which is, if you really, really believe what you're saying, if you really believe democracy is at stake, and that is a threat, if you really believe that, right, there is no difference than there's a difference in how it's enacted, but like if you think about Ukraine being invaded by Russia, all of a sudden you look in the trench and there's a guy that played the piano, a guy that, was a machinist and probably a college professor. All of them have nothing in common. They probably all voted differently, but they are in the trench together, putting their life on the line to fight the Russian hordes. This is politically that moment we're at. If you truly, truly believe democracy is at stake, there is nothing else that can come in the way between alliances, because your different view on whatever it is, guns or taxation or whatever, doesn't matter if you don't have a democracy. Right. And so, Dick Cheney, I get it. You don't like that we went into Iraq. I will actually probably guess, though, that you probably supported Iraq when it happened, like everybody else did. And but I get it. You can be upset about that. But he came around and did something amazing, which is one of the few former elected Republicans. I mean, George Bush didn't speak out nearly like Dick Cheney did. And, and I think we have to honor that. I honor his service all around. I think he was a man that meant well. And he made a mistake. We make, like you mentioned, we make mistakes every day, but we're not making decisions about whether to go to war in Iraq or not. Those are big consequential decisions. But his honor cannot be questioned. And I think we have to get to a point where we can have differences, but the real difference should be, is somebody trying to act honorably or not? And that should be the dividing line. I think so.
Well, I think so. And because before we move on, because I want to talk about the election and some of the other things, but not to move on from Kevin McCarthy. Kevin McCarthy played a rather significant role in the California referendum, didn't he? He went went all in on trying to defeat Gavin Newsom's referendum that will allow California to redistrict. I mean, that, as part of the Democratic sweep of last week. I mean, I expected it was going to pass, but I don't think anybody expected it was going to win by that huge a margin. So Kevin McCarthy, swing and miss again. Yeah,
and he's look, I kind of ruefully, I don't know if that's the right word, rooted for him when he was trying to go against like Matt Gaetz, but he failed. He's failing at everything he's trying to do politically now, and that's what's crazy. Is this is the dude. This goes to show how fortunes can change or how honor matters. Is like, on his third term, he was the third most powerful Republican. I mean, that's a political feat that is almost impossible to match. Was a fantastic politician. I'll give him that, right? Mm-hmm. He remembers he would always text me and talk about, he was friends with my mom and everybody's mom, right? Mm-hmm. But now he's failing, and he brought a lot of big donors. I think Charlie Munger was one of them. A lot of big donors to try to beat Prop 50. And not only didn't they beat it, I think it probably got more yeses than Kamala Harris got votes in California. I mean, Democrats were fired up. And the point is, look, I think you and I and probably almost everybody in California likes the idea of fair maps, and we want fair maps and independent redistricting. But the second Texas made a decision to kind of violate the norms, Democrats had to fight back. And they made it a referendum on Trump, and it's pretty clear what California as a whole thinks of Trump, I think.
You mentioned Texas, and I heard you make this point, and there are other larger points, but one of the things that we saw in the election last week was that it turns out that Republicans might have been renting Hispanic votes rather than buying them. One of the theories behind what they're doing, what Republicans are doing in Texas, is they're kind of drawing districts with the assumption that Hispanics will continue their drift to the right. This may turn out to be kind of a delusion, right? Because yes, you did have Hispanic voters that we're willing to vote for Donald Trump and we're willing to vote for Republicans. But you look at the exit polls in Virginia and in New Jersey, and it would certainly suggest that they are disillusioned, whether they're coming home or not. What do you think? I mean, that may mean, in terms of just the raw numbers, this Texas thing may not play out the way Republicans think.
Yeah. By the way, as a side note, I'm going to be interested in the black male vote as well, because that was swinging wildly Republican. Look, and this is a question. I mean, my wife's Hispanic, and she makes the point all the time. She's like, Hispanics are not a monolith, right? She's Salvadorian. There's Cubans. There's Argentinians. Mexicans, and they all have different interests. It's like you and I voting as Germans, right? Like we don't. I mean, we have cultural Germanics, but but I think what's clear is Hispanics gave Donald Trump the vote because they felt economic insecurity. They actually are kind of hawkish on immigration. This is a big mistake Democrats have made, is assuming that Hispanics just want to open the door. They don't. But they also see people that look like them being harassed and being carded, basically, based on the fact that they're brown. You and I don't have to worry about getting pulled over by CBP and questioned. They do,
Yeah.
And I think every one of them. And by the way, the Supreme Court has said that they could do that. Yeah. Like you can pull somebody over on the basis of their race. Yeah. And so anyway, so I think you saw a massive, kind of, whoa, that's not what we voted for. Now, here's the danger for the Democrats is this is not a message that they want open borders. They still want border control, because every Hispanic that is voting came here the right way, because contrary to Donald Trump's comments, illegals can't vote. So all those that came here legally, they did it the right way, and they want everybody else to have to do it the same way because they did it the hard way. And so, but they want compassion and humanity. And I think what you see right now, if I had to guess, in kind of the monolithic Hispanic vote, is they still have economic insecurity and they are not wed really well to either party. And they're probably wildly swinging back and forth, collectively trying to figure out where they belong party-wise. And it's up for grabs. And hopefully the Democrats can get this, because, that's obviously the largest growing minority.
Well, and obviously we'll determine, which way a lot of these key states go in 2026 and 2028. Let me throw an idea out at you, because I know there was a lot of, punditry after the election. Donald Trump blamed it on the shutdown. I'm a little skeptical about that. Obviously, the economy, cutting against Trump. Trump is clearly losing his edge on the economy. But one of the factors that seems to have played an outsized impact on the election, particularly among young voters, were the videos, the ICE videos. Those pictures, which have gone viral, everybody has them on their phone. Everybody is seeing them. You're on TikTok. You're on YouTube. You're seeing these, masked, brute squad, ICE agents, throwing grandmas to the ground, breaking windows, helicoptering into apartment buildings, and I wondered early on, when those pictures, what impact those pictures would have, because it's one thing to say I want secure border, I want illegals, deported. It's quite something different when you're seeing the human face. So I think the videos played a big role, and that's something that I don't see Trump pivoting on. I don't see MAGA moving away from that at all.
I don't either. And here's the interesting thing is, I think a lot of it is, when we have a government for the first time that exists entirely in the online sphere, right? I mean, they watch Newsmax and they look at X and they make decisions on the basis of that. And what's cool to do on X, and I do this sometimes too much, is to troll people, right? And so they took trolling on X to a new level, and now they do it from government accounts. Think of the Department of Labor posters they put out with the good looking strong white guy, and it's always about America for Americans, clearly trying to troll and also send a message. Well, look, if I'm a Hispanic person, I'm going to look at that and go is that saying, or if I'm a woman even, is that saying that's not for me, that this place isn't for me? And then, yes, the videos are not just, throwing grandmas to the ground or pulling people out of school lines. It's American citizens being arrested, harassed, knocked down, shot in the head with pepper balls. And then a guy with an SS jacket. Sure, yeah, it's a cavalry jacket, but walking around Chicago without a horse and having a jacket with a hat and a freaking thing. And then when people made fun of him, they put out basically a troll you Nazi video. It turns out we don't want to be Nazis in this country. And look, I would encourage, I'm kind of mixed on this because there's my regular side that really wants good governance. And then there's my side that's like, yeah, Republicans keep doing it. Keep doing it and see where it leads, right? See what the American people think. But I also don't really want them to, because I don't want us to become numb to that.
Yeah, I mean, that is the danger. And of course, there's something about that whole ethos that is so exciting. There's so many things that come to mind about this. I'm trying to think since the last time you and I talked. So Donald Trump was floating the idea of a third term, appears to have backed off. I think people are free to take him at his word. I still don't take him at his word. Nothing is settled with Donald Trump. It's government, it's economy by whim. Where do you come down on this? What do you think about Trump third? Because I have a hard time imagining him declaring himself. Yes, I am a lame duck. Let's talk about J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio, not me.
Yeah, I think he's going to try to keep this alive to an extent, but I don't think I'm not worried about it. I do think we need to kind of be on our guard about it. I just think the Constitution is so blatantly clear about this. I reread it, 22nd Amendment, I guess. I reread it, and it's like, it even has a caveat in there, like if you were vice president when you became president, that counts as a term. And so, he's kind of floated, well, I can run as vice president and the president can resign. I just don't think there's any wiggle room for it. But also, if I was Donald Trump and my goal, which he doesn't care about the party, I think people need to understand that. He doesn't care about the party.
Does not.
And so, but my goal would be to try to keep down competitors. And as long as Donald Trump is keeping alive the possibility that he can run again, your Marco Rubios, your J.D. Vances are going to kind of be quiet and kind of stay underground. The second it becomes obvious he's not running again, there will be a civil war in the GOP. You're seeing it already. It's right. It is. They are trying to keep the lid on this steam, but it's gonna blow. Yeah. And
can we be Nazis? So, yeah. Can we not be Nazis? Is
right.
Okay, so let's talk about this because we had two major things happen in the last week that go to the question of, does this actually affect Donald Trump's power? Now, with all the caveats that off-year elections are sometimes shaky predictors, they don't actually affect his actual power. It was a shellacking from coast to coast. Obviously sending a very clear message about Donald Trump's popularity. And then you had that moment in the U.S. Supreme Court where I think that Donald Trump has been really, really nervous about this case involving the tariffs, but he's also been, I think, counting on the Supreme Court continuing to give him the green lights to do whatever he wants, including maybe a third term. And what happened was literally the day after he suffers these massive electoral losses, you have 3 conservative justices, his appointees, expressing a great deal of skepticism about whether or not his tariffs are unconstitutional. Now, so give me your sense of how this affects Trump's power, because, a lot of that power has been the perception of power, right?
Right, yes.
You cannot resist him. No one's going to check him. No one's going to stop him. Election obviously emboldens the opposition. And then suddenly these conservative Supreme Court justices remember that they're actually conservatives. Mm-hmm. What do you think?
So, and the other interesting point about it is our perception that Donald Trump is unstoppable with his power. The source of that was the Supreme Court.
Yes.
When they declared that Donald Trump is exempt from any criminal prosecution for anything, which is why the corruption has been astounding, by the way, almost too much to even talk about. That's the problem. And so when the source, whether we consciously realize it or not, when the source of that feeling of unstoppability turns the tap off, which is what potentially could happen. Now, also, I never expected the Supreme Court would give Donald Trump full immunity. So that's the caveat.
Yeah, I did not either. Yeah.
Yeah. So they may say he's got the right to the tariffs. But what I was hearing in the questions sounded like justices that were not willing to give him that power, including, I forget which one it was, that was like, so you're telling me if we give him this power, basically
Gorsuch.
Congress can never pull it back. Yeah. And I'm listening to those questions going, those don't sound like people that are trying to get to yes, and I do honestly a little bit, Charlie, worry about, what happens with the tariffs that have been collected. Do we, I hope there is a caveat that we don't reimburse them, because I think that's a serious financial hit to have to do that. I don't know. But this is, and I think once they make that decision, now the downside is, is that it could bail out Donald Trump's economy, right? And so politically, that's just something to be aware of. But I think it will absolutely stunt his growth, if you will. I think this election last week, plus this tariff thing, will probably put him at about half power, and it's going to energize Democrats.
See, I think that's right. And I have to say that I was very surprised by the arguments, because I had just assumed that the court was not ever going to challenge him on something as fundamental as the tariff because of the economic impact. If you have to give back billions of dollars in refunds, that's the kind of thing that a John Roberts court just wouldn't do. However, and this is kind of interesting, because remember what really triggered Donald Trump about that Canadian ad, the Ontario government, provincial ad featuring Ronald Reagan making the conservative case against tariffs. He thought that it was a way of influencing the conservative justices on the court. He has been really worried about this case, and he's been really worried about the conservatives. And then these conservatives come out, and you have Gorsuch worrying about, out of control executive. Justice Roberts describing tariffs as taxes on the American people. Amy Coney Barrett asking some really, really tough questions about, is there any limit to the government's, the president's power? Is it really a matter of national security that we slap tariffs on Spain and France? Are all of these about national security? There's also the major questions doctrine that the conservatives have used to strike down lots of stuff that Biden did, which is basically that if something's a major question, then Congress needs to give the president very, very explicit authority. You can't just assume it. And they're pointing out that in the Constitution, the power to tax Americans is specifically reserved to Congress, not the president. This law that he's saying, this emergency law, does not even mention tariffs. So suddenly you got a picture that this is a court that might actually draw a red line for Donald Trump. And I kind of wonder what that does to that sort of impression of Donald Trump as being with the wind at his back, no guardrails, no check. Those two developments, you think, might take him down to half speed, which is, so this could actually have been a pivotal week. Adam,
It could be. Yeah. And I want to go back to the tax thing, because remember, I think it was Justice Roberts that made the case that the individual mandate was a tax, right?
Yeah, right.
One of them, with Obamacare. So they threw out the individual mandate based on that. Now, it takes about 2 steps to get to Obamacare. Individual mandate is a tax. You have to kind of go through 2 iterations. To get to tariffs as a tax, you probably have to go through just 1 iteration, which is the American people have to pay more and Congress had nothing to do with it. And it's a government action. And so, and you make the point about, which I hadn't thought really too much about, which is how much Trump is panicked about this. He just a few days ago went off on a diatribe. I don't know if it was, I don't remember if I read it or if I saw it, where he was saying how big of a deal this is and how this could be game changing or whatever. And that is contrary to typical, because typically Donald Trump declares victory no matter what. He sets himself up, I would have expected he would have said, well, if they throw out the tariffs, well, that's on them. I tried, right? No, he's really upset about this. And this could be another political mortal wound that just basically hastens the day where he's a lame duck. I think that kind of started today a little bit, or a week ago a little bit, but now you're starting to see just more and more paper cuts lead to a guy that has swollen ankles and can't move around as much.
Well, I was struck by how worried he was about this case and how often he has written about it. It is as if somebody has talked to him and said, these justices who are you've been pretty confident on, might actually surprise you on all of this, because and during the argument, Neil Katyal was arguing the case, and he even reminded Sam Alito that about his originalist positions on other issues. Now Sam Alito is nothing but a hack, but
Yeah.
it obviously someone has warned him about it. That's why there is this discussion of is there a plan B? But I think the larger question is, if that impression that the Supreme Court does not always have his back, that rattles him, and I think that will change. I think at least the perception of his power. Okay, so let's talk.
And well, I just want to add real quick. Think about the fact too that every time Donald Trump gets angry and does something, whether it's to a country or whatever, it always involves tariff. So you're taking away 75% or whatever of his tools that he can use or he is using to fight back and look powerful.
No, you're exactly right. And again, you look, I mean, justices read the newspaper. They follow election returns. They have seen the consequences, you hope, of the immunity decision. They see the aggregation of executive power. This will be their opportunity to do it. Now, look, they have other cases in front of them that may allow Trump to more easily fire members of independent boards and bodies and things like that. But this was extraordinary. So in my newsletter the day after the election, I quoted you extensively about Mikey Sherrill, who you served with in Congress. In terms of the Democrats, who is the face of the Democrats right now? And I don't really want to go down this rabbit hole, but there are a lot of bright and shiny objects out there that we see Democrats find. But, they have two genuine stars right now. Yeah, Abigail Spanberger, who won overwhelmingly, double digits in Virginia. This was a state that Glenn Youngkin won by like 8 to 10 points, 4 years ago. And then you have Mikey Sherrill, who was supposed to be in this squeaker race in New Jersey, and she just blew the Republicans away. And the thing about them is these are really impressive candidates. Their backgrounds. Spanberger is a former CIA agent, as you wrote. Mikey Sherrill is a former pilot, and you described her as almost like the perfect central casting candidate. And if Democrats are looking for strong women, centrist candidates who can win in swing states, they have them right there, don't they?
Totally. And that's the thing is, there's a lot of excitement about Mondami and great, be excited about him, but could he have won in Virginia? Maybe, but not by this kind of a margin. Same with New Jersey. And what you see in both these candidates is they weren't necessarily on the campaign trail lighting fires everywhere, lighting people on fire with impressiveness, but they were disciplined. They stuck to it. And here's the thing. They were taking the lane that Republicans have grabbed for themselves unrightfully, which is the lane of patriotism, the lane of defense and service. So you have a military pilot, you have an intelligence officer. Now, if I would have told you 10 years ago, a military pilot and intelligence officer is running for Congress, what are they? You'd be like, oh, those are Republicans, right? Because typically in the past,
that's their brand.
Republicans, that was the brand. Now, this is a great brand for Democrats because, believe it or not, Americans actually, we may be a little disappointed now, but we still have pride in our country. We still believe that service to the country is important. And this is a great model. Now, it doesn't mean that Spanberger is basically a Republican in Democratic clothing. She's not. She's made it clear she's going to aggressively go after the redistricting issues and stuff like this. And probably will govern as a typical Democrat. But that is the kind of way, those are the kind of candidates, Charlie, that Democrats have got to run in certain areas, especially if they want to win back, for instance, the union vote that they're losing. They're losing the union vote, which I never would have thought possible. And so, I think great model. Doesn't mean, look, if you're in the heart of LA, you don't necessarily have to run a moderate. I personally wish you would, but I get it, right? Be clear to the district. But on those swing areas, I think it's essential. And I think Democrats actually are way better at playing that game than Republicans are, because Republicans are just going to go with the most MAGA ever. I think Democrats are better at kind of understanding who can win and who can't.
Okay, so this is really an interesting point because, and I think it was Jonathan Martin who made the point that one of the Democrats, poll cards here is that Republicans are wedded to Donald Trump. They do not dare criticize Donald Trump. They do not dare break with MAGA. Whereas Democrats now have some flexibility. There is a little more give, but I hope they follow the model. I mean, they study the model that you laid out for Mikey Sherrill, which is she went hard on Donald Trump, went hard against MAGA, but then got into the nitty gritty of growth, more affordable housing, doing something about electric, the cost of electricity, doing things about property taxes, that nitty gritty affordability thing. So you're attacking Donald Trump, but you don't make it esoteric. You make it very, 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 very tangible for voters. And that formula was incredibly successful in Virginia and New Jersey, more so than anybody saw. So, I mean, that there's a model there. And frankly, I could see that model playing virtually in every state in the country.
Yeah, look, as much as I would love to see campaigns run on solely how bad Donald Trump is, right? And run on the issue of democracy, because I firmly believe in that, those aren't polling, the democracy thing polls, but it's like number 8. So find the issues people care about, and don't take a position on the issues simply because of what the polls are saying. Be genuine, because I think there's another lesson here, which is because of how much we have let people into our lives as politicians and political folks. I think people demand genuineness, and I think they can sniff out disingenuineness. And so as Democrats, find those issues, go after Trump, don't make it all about Trump, talk about what people care about, and be genuine about it. And and that's it. I think that's the formula.
I think the most deadly pejorative that you see is somebody is a slick politician or a slick typical politician. The moment they sniff that out, you are done. Adam Kinzinger, I got to go see the movie on demand, The Last Republican. I got it queued up. That's what I'm going to be doing tonight.
Let me know what you think.
I will. We'll talk about it maybe on the next time you show up on the podcast. Hey, thank you all for listening to this episode of To the Contrary podcast. I'm Charlie Sykes. You know why we do this. You know why Adam and I keep doing this, and we'll keep doing this because we need to keep reminding you folks out there, you're not alone. You are not crazy ones. Thank you.